The first sound was barely a sound at all, more like a whisper of air, a tremor in the darkness. It slipped through the cracks of the old farmhouse like a ghost, so faint that Lena, buried beneath her quilt, almost dismissed it as the wind playing tricks on the loose window panes. But then it came again, louder, sharper, a whimper so raw it clawed at her chest. Lena's eyes flew open. That wasn't the wind. That was Bella. The German shepherd never made noises like that, not unless something was terribly wrong. Lena's heart kicked into a gallop. She threw off the blankets, her bare feet hitting the cold wooden floor with a thud. The digital clock on her nightstand glowed 2:17 a.m. in angry red numbers. "Bella?" she called out, her voice thick with sleep. No answer. Just another whine, this one higher, more desperate. Lena didn't wait. She bolted down the dimly lit hallway, her pulse roaring in her ears. Bella had given birth just 2 nights ago, 6 perfect wriggling puppies, and had been the picture of a doting mother. She hadn't left their side, not even to eat, unless Lena coaxed her. So why was she crying now? Was a puppy hurt? Was she in labor again? Had something gotten into the house? The possibilities flashed through Lena's mind like lightning strikes as she skidded to a stop outside the whelping room. The door was ajar, the soft glow of the heat lamp spilling into the hallway. And then she saw it. The scene hit her like a punch to the gut. Bella wasn't curled up in the nest of blankets with her pups. She was standing rigid in the far corner of the room, her golden eyes wide and wild, her entire body trembling. Her tail was tucked tight against her belly, her ears flat against her skull, and clutched gently between her teeth, a tiny, lifeless-looking bundle. Lena's hands flew to her mouth. Oh God! Had Bella accidentally hurt one of the puppies? Had some instinct gone wrong? Her mind raced with terrible images, a crushed skull, a broken limb, but then a sound, a weak, pitiful mewl. Not a puppy, a kitten. So small it could fit in the palm of her hand, its fur soaked and matted, its breaths coming in shallow, shuddering gasps. It was barely alive. Lena's knees nearly buckled. Bella had brought it inside. From where? The storm. The realization hit her like a bucket of ice water. It had been pouring for hours, a relentless, howling tempest that rattled the roof and turned the yard into a swamp. And Bella had gone out in it. The dog's eyes locked onto Lena's, and in that moment, there was no mistaking what that gaze meant. It wasn't just fear. It wasn't just confusion. It was pleading. "Help me save it." Lena didn't hesitate. She crossed the room in 2 strides, her hands outstretched. Bella didn't resist. She carefully released the kitten into Lena's cupped palms, her nose nudging it gently as if to say, "Hurry." The kitten was freezing. Its tiny body was limp, its heartbeat fluttering like a moth trapped behind glass. Lena could feel its ribs beneath her fingers, each breath a struggle. She acted on instinct. Cradling the kitten against her chest, she grabbed the nearest towel, a soft, fleece-lined one she'd set aside for the puppies, and began rubbing fiercely, trying to stimulate warmth back into its tiny body. "Come on, little one," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Stay with me." Bella pressed close, her wet fur soaking into Lena's pajamas, her nose inches from the kitten's face. Every few seconds, she let out a soft whine, her breath warm against Lena's fingers. And then, a miracle. The kitten's chest rose in a deeper breath. Its tiny paws twitched. And then, with a shudder, it let out the faintest, most pitiful mew Lena had ever heard. Bella's reaction was instant. She licked the kitten's face once, twice, quick, frantic strokes, before looking up at Lena, her eyes shining with something that looked an awful lot like hope. Lena's vision blurred with tears. This wasn't just a dog finding a stray animal. This was a mother recognizing a life in need and refusing to let it go. The moment the kitten's icy body touched her palms, Lena's breath caught in her throat. Its fur was matted with rain and something stickier, mud, maybe blood, and its tiny ribs barely moved beneath her fingers. The heartbeat she felt was terrifyingly faint, like the last flicker of a candle before it gutters out. "Jesus," she whispered, instinctively tucking the shivering creature against her chest, where her body heat might penetrate its frozen fur. Her thumbs worked in quick circles across its back, the way she'd done for countless fading neonates at the shelter. The kitten's skin felt paper-thin, its body temperature dangerously low. Bella's whine cut through the moment like a knife. The German shepherd was pacing in tight, frantic circles, her nails clicking against the hardwood floor. Every few seconds, she'd stop to stare at Lena with those liquid amber eyes, then resume her agitated path. When Lena didn't immediately move, Bella let out a sharp, uncharacteristic bark that made the hair on Lena's arms stand up. That wasn't just anxiety. That was a demand. "There's more!" Lena's voice cracked. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Of course there were more. No one abandoned just one kitten in a storm. Bella answered by launching herself at the back door, her powerful body slamming against the wood with enough force to rattle the frame. Her claws left fresh gouges in the already scarred surface as she scratched desperately at the handle. Lena's body moved before her mind could process the danger. She grabbed the kitten-sized heating pad from the whelping supplies, wrapped the fragile creature in a soft towel, and placed it gently in the makeshift incubator she'd fashioned from a plastic bin lined with blankets. The kitten's weak protest nearly broke her heart. "Stay!" she ordered Bella, though she knew the command was useless. The dog was already vibrating with desperate energy, her entire body quivering with the need to act. The storm hit Lena like a wall when she wrenched open the door. Icy rain needled her face, driven sideways by winds that howled through the oak trees surrounding the farmhouse. The temperature had dropped at least 20 degrees since sunset, and now the rain carried the bitter sting of nearly frozen. "Boots! Boots!" Lena muttered, shoving her bare feet into the muddy work boots she kept by the door. They were still damp from yesterday's chores, the insides clammy against her skin. The flashlight from the hook beside the door flickered when she thumbed the switch, batteries dying, because of course they were. Bella didn't wait for permission. The moment the door cracked open, she was through it like a golden streak, disappearing into the maelstrom. "Bella, wait!" Lena's shout was swallowed by the storm. She plunged after the dog, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly as she sprinted across the flooded yard. Mud sucked at her boots, threatening to pull them off with each step. Rain soaked through her pajama top in seconds, the fabric turning icy and clinging to her skin. The beam of light caught Bella's silhouette near the old dumpster at the edge of the property. The dog was circling something, her nose pressed to the ground, her entire posture radiating urgency. As Lena drew closer, the flashlight revealed the horror. A sodden cardboard box, collapsed in on itself from the weight of the rain. One side had completely given way, exposing its pitiful contents to the elements. 3 tiny shapes lay motionless inside. Lena's stomach lurched. She dropped to her knees in the mud, not feeling the cold seeping through her pants, not caring about the rain streaming down her face. Her hands trembled as she reached for the nearest bundle of fur. The first kitten was already gone. Its tiny body was stiff, the fur on its face still spiked from whatever final struggle it had endured. Lena's throat closed as she gently set it aside, forcing herself to check the others. The second kitten was barely clinging to life. Its chest rose and fell in shallow, irregular movements, its pink mouth slightly open as if frozen mid-cry. The third was in slightly better shape. When Lena touched it, it managed a feeble squirm, its tiny claws catching on the fabric of her sleeve. Bella made a sound Lena had never heard before, a high, keening whine that cut through the storm's roar. Before Lena could react, the dog carefully seized the strongest kitten by the scruff, her movements impossibly gentle for such a large animal. Those golden eyes locked onto Lena's, and in that moment there was no mistaking the message. Hurry, before it's too late. Lena didn't hesitate. She tucked the second kitten inside her soaked shirt, where her body heat might buy it precious minutes. The little creature felt like an ice cube against her stomach, but she barely registered the discomfort. With her free hand, she scooped up the lifeless kitten too. She couldn't leave it here, not like this, not in the mud and the cold. The trek back to the house felt endless. The wind tore at them, the rain blurred Lena's vision, and twice she nearly lost her footing in the churned-up mud. Bella stayed glued to her side, the kitten dangling safely from her jaws, her body acting as a windbreak for Lena's unsteady progress. When they finally burst through the back door, the warmth of the house hit Lena like a physical shock. She went straight to the whelping area, her numb fingers fumbling as she unwrapped the kitten from her shirt. Its fur was plastered flat, its body temperature terrifyingly low. The first kitten she'd rescued was still in its makeshift incubator, but its breathing seemed stronger now, its movements less feeble. Bella carefully deposited her charge beside its sibling before turning to Lena with an expression that needed no translation. Do something. Lena's hands shook as she grabbed clean towels and the heating pad. The reality of their situation crashed over her. One kitten dead, 3 fighting for their lives, and Bella's own puppies needing attention. The math was brutal. The chances were slim. But as she looked at Bella's rain-streaked face, at the way the dog hovered over the kittens with undisguised worry, Lena knew she had to try. For them. For all of them. The warmth of the farmhouse kitchen hit Lena's rain-soaked skin like a physical blow as she staggered inside, her arms full of shivering life. Water pooled around her boots in spreading puddles, mixing with the mud caked on her pajama legs. The storm still howled outside, rattling the windows in their frames, but in this moment, all that existed was the desperate mission before her. Okay, Lena whispered to herself, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she carefully arranged the kittens on the thick towel she'd spread across the kitchen table. The fluorescent light overhead revealed the full extent of their condition, their tiny ribs visible beneath soaked fur, their noses pale pink instead of healthy rose. The smallest one, the first Bella had brought in, barely moved at all, its chest rising in shallow, irregular flutters. Bella shook herself violently just inside the doorway, sending a spray of rainwater in all directions. Without pausing to dry off, she pushed past Lena's legs and went straight to the whelping box, where her 6 puppies slept in a contented heap. The German Shepherd nosed urgently through her litter before turning back to Lena with a whine that seemed to say, "They're safe. Now help the others." Lena moved with the precision of someone who'd done this too many times before. She grabbed the emergency heating pad from the cupboard, plugged it in, and covered it with a soft flannel receiving blanket. Her hands trembled as she filled an eyedropper with warm kitten formula from the always stocked supply in her pantry. The routine movements helped steady her. Measure, mix, test the temperature on her wrist. "Come on, sweethearts," she murmured as she gently lifted the most responsive kitten onto the warming pad. Its tiny claws caught in the fabric as it instinctively tried to knead. When Lena brought the dropper to its mouth, the kitten latched on with surprising strength, its pink tongue working frantically at the rubber tip. Bella watched this entire process from inches away, her wet nose nearly touching Lena's elbow. The dog's breath came in quick, anxious puffs against Lena's arm as she tracked every movement. When Lena switched to the second kitten, Bella let out a quiet whimper, the sound a mother makes when her baby cries. Then something extraordinary happened. Without warning, Bella carefully took the weakest kitten, the one barely clinging to life, by the scruff and carried it to her whelping box. Lena froze, the dropper halfway to the third kitten's mouth, her heart pounding. She'd seen dogs accidentally hurt small animals before. their instincts getting crossed between prey drive and maternal care. But Bella's movements were achingly gentle. She set the limp kitten down among her sleeping puppies, then began meticulously licking its tiny body with the same rhythmic strokes she used on her newborns. Her rough tongue moved over the kitten's face, cleaning its closed eyes, stimulating circulation. When she reached its back, she paused to nudge it closer to the warm pile of puppy bodies. Lena's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't accidental caregiving. This wasn't confused instinct. The way Bella's ears twitched forward when the kitten gave the faintest wiggle, the way she adjusted her licking to avoid overwhelming the fragile creature. This was deliberate, purposeful. This was love. Tears blurred Lena's vision as she watched the scene unfold. The kitten, now christened Storm in her mind, lay nestled between two plump German Shepherd puppies, their body heat slowly seeping into its frozen limbs. Bella alternated between licking Storm and checking her other charges, her maternal focus expanding effortlessly to include this tiny stranger. But Storm wasn't responding like the others. Its breathing remained dangerously shallow, its body temperature still too low. When Lena reached out to check its gums, they were pale, a bad sign. She carefully extracted the kitten from the puppy pile, cradling it against her own chest, where her heartbeat might comfort it. "Come on, little fighter," she whispered, stroking the damp fur between its ears with one finger. "You've come this far. Don't give up now." Bella immediately left her puppies to press against Lena's legs, her warm head coming to rest heavily on Lena's knee. Up close, Lena could see the exhaustion in the dog's face, the drooping eyelids, the slight tremble in her muscles from their mad dash through the storm. But Bella's eyes never left the kitten in Lena's hands, her gaze so intense it seemed she might heal Storm through sheer willpower. The clock on the stove ticked loudly in the quiet kitchen. 3:42 a.m. Somewhere in the back of her mind, Lena registered that she had to be at the shelter in 5 hours, that her clothes were soaked through, that she'd left the back door slightly ajar in her rush, and now a cold draft snaked across the floor. None of it mattered. All that existed was the fragile life in her hands and the devoted mother dog beside her, both willing Storm to keep fighting. Lena adjusted her grip, bringing the kitten's face closer to her own. Its breath hitched, then came a little stronger. The tiniest squeak escaped its mouth. And then, miracle of miracles, Storm's eyes fluttered open, revealing irises of the palest blue Lena had ever seen. Bella's reaction was instantaneous. She let out a soft boof of excitement, her tail thumping against the floor hard enough to shake the nearby chair. Before Lena could react, the dog gently took Storm's scruff in her teeth and carried the kitten back to the whelping box, carefully placing it right in the center of the puppy pile. As Lena watched through tear-filled eyes, Bella circled 3 times before settling down to nurse, carefully positioning herself so Storm had access too. When the kitten instinctively nuzzled at her belly alongside the puppies, Bella looked up at Lena with an expression that needed no translation. "See? I told you he was one of us." The dam broke then. Lena sank to the floor beside the whelping box, her back against the cabinets, and let the tears come. They streamed down her face as she watched Bella tend to her unlikely family, licking Storm's fur into some semblance of order between nursing sessions, nudging him closer when he strayed too near the edge. In 15 years of animal rescue, Lena had never seen anything like this. Not just the cross-species adoption, but the determination, the conscious choice to love something so different from oneself. As Storm finally latched onto Nurse, his tiny paws kneading Bella's belly fur, Lena reached out to stroke the dog's head. "You," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "are something special." Bella responded by licking Lena's fingers once before returning her attention to her charges. Her body curled protectively around all 7 babies, 6 puppies, and 1 kitten, who didn't know he was different. Outside, the storm raged on. But here, in this warm corner of the kitchen, something miraculous had taken root. And as Lena watched over them, her own heart swelling with a love she couldn't name, she realized she was witnessing something far beyond instinct. This was family, in its purest, most unexpected form. The kitchen clock's minute hand crawled from 3:47 to 4:13, as Lena sat motionless on the hardwood floor, her back pressed against the cabinet doors. Every muscle in her body screamed from tension, but she didn't dare move, not when Storm's fragile life hung in the balance. The syringe in her hand trembled slightly as she drew another half-milliliter of warm formula. Across her lap, Bella formed a living barrier of warmth, her massive body curled protectively around Lena's legs like a golden fortress. The dog's chin rested on Lena's thigh, her wet nose occasionally twitching as she monitored the kitten cradled in Lena's palms. "Just a little more, sweetheart," Lena murmured, bringing the syringe to Storm's mouth. The kitten's response was weaker this time, just the faintest flick of its tiny pink tongue against the rubber tip. A drop of formula beaded at the corner of its mouth, and Lena quickly dabbed it away with the edge of the towel. Bella let out a quiet whine that vibrated through Lena's legs. The dog's warm breath gusted across Lena's fingers as she leaned closer, her amber eyes reflecting the dim nightlight's glow. When Storm's chest hitched, Bella's ears flattened against her skull, and she made that sound again, that heartbreaking, high-pitched keen that seemed too human for an animal. "I know, girl," Lena whispered, stroking Bella's damp fur with her free hand. "I'm worried too." Outside, the storm had settled into a steady, pounding rhythm. Rain tapped against the windows like impatient fingers, while occasional gusts made the old farmhouse's timbers groan. The scent of wet dog and kitten formula mixed with the earthy aroma of the storm seeping in beneath the doors. Lena adjusted her position slightly, wincing as her stiff joints protested. The cold from the floor had seeped through her sweatpants hours ago, leaving her legs numb below the knees. She'd long since stopped noticing the dampness of her clothes, or the way her unbrushed hair stuck to her neck. None of that mattered. Only the fragile weight in her hands. Storm's breathing had grown more irregular in the past 20 minutes. Sometimes his tiny chest would rise and fall in quick succession, then stop altogether for terrifying seconds before starting again. Each pause sent a fresh bolt of fear through Lena's heart, each resumed breath bringing temporary relief. Bella seemed to sense these dangerous pauses before they happened. Every time Storm's breathing grew shallow, the dog would tense, her muscles coiling beneath Lena's touch. Then, as if willing the kitten to keep fighting, Bella would stretch forward and lick Storm's face with quick, precise strokes of her rough tongue. The first time this happened, Lena had nearly pulled away, afraid the large dog might accidentally hurt the tiny creature. But she quickly realized Bella's movements were calculated with impossible precision. The dog's tongue moved with surgeon-like care, stimulating circulation without applying dangerous pressure. She alternated between licking Storm's face and his tiny paws, her ministrations never ceasing even when her own exhaustion became obvious in the droop of her eyelids. At 4:38, Lena noticed the first encouraging sign. As she brought the syringe to Storm's mouth again, his front paw, no larger than her thumbnail, twitched slightly. Then, stronger this time, his claws extended and retracted in a weak kneading motion against her palm. "Bella, look!" Lena's voice cracked with exhaustion and sudden hope. The dog was already watching, her entire body rigid with focus. When Storm's chest rose in a deeper, more even breath, Bella made a sound Lena had never heard before, a soft, almost musical trill deep in her throat. The minutes stretched on, each one marked by tiny victories. Storm's breathing grew stronger. His movements became more purposeful. When Lena gently pinched the skin on his neck, it snapped back quicker than before, a small but crucial improvement in hydration. At 5:17, as the first pale fingers of dawn crept through the rain-streaked windows, Storm opened his eyes. Lena nearly dropped the syringe. Those eyes, an impossible crystalline blue that seemed too vivid for such a tiny creature, blinked up at her slowly. Then, with a strength that belied his size, Storm turned his head toward Bella and let out the faintest, most defiant mew Lena had ever heard. The sound tore through Lena's carefully maintained composure. Hot tears spilled down her cheeks, dripping onto the towel wrapped around Storm. She didn't bother wiping them away. There was no point. More came just as fast, a torrent of relief and wonder she couldn't contain. Bella's reaction was instantaneous. With a soft grunt, the dog rose from her protective curl around Lena's legs and carefully took Storm's scruff in her teeth. Lena loosened her grip just enough to allow the transfer, her hands hovering beneath the kitten in case Bella faltered. But Bella didn't falter. She carried Storm the short distance to the whelping box, with the same care she showed her own puppies, her movements deliberate and steady. The puppies, all 6 of them, were piled together in a contented heap, their bellies round from recent feeding. Bella placed Storm right in the center of this warm puppy pile, then used her nose to gently nudge him into the perfect position. When one of the puppies shifted in its sleep, accidentally pushing against Storm, Bella immediately intervened, carefully moving the offender with her teeth before returning her attention to the kitten. Lena watched, transfixed, as Bella began the familiar ritual of cleaning Storm with long, thorough strokes of her tongue. The kitten, still weak but undeniably stronger, lifted his head slightly to meet each lick, his tiny mouth opening in what looked like contentment. When the cleaning was done to Bella's exacting standards, she settled down beside the pile, her body forming a protective curve around all 7 babies. Storm, now nestled securely between 2 sleeping puppies, looked impossibly small against their growing bodies. But as Lena watched through tear-blurred vision, one of the puppies shifted in its sleep, throwing a chubby paw over Storm in what looked like an embrace. Bella looked up then, meeting Lena's gaze across the short distance. In the golden light of dawn, the dog's eyes shone with something that went beyond animal instinct. There was pride there, purpose, and a quiet joy that needed no translation. Lena crawled the few feet to the whelping box, her stiff muscles protesting every movement. When she reached Bella, she didn't speak. Words felt inadequate. Instead, she buried her fingers in the dog's damp fur, scratching behind those expressive ears in the spot Bella loved best. Bella responded by leaning into the touch, her tail thumping softly against the floor. Then, with a contented sigh, she rested her chin on the edge of the box, her watchful eyes returning to her unusual family. Outside, the storm finally broke. The relentless rain softened to a gentle patter, then stopped altogether. Through the kitchen window, Lena could see the first golden rays of sunlight breaking through the clouds, painting the soaked fields in shimmering light. But in this moment, the only sunrise that mattered was the one happening in the whelping box, where a tiny gray kitten named Storm had decided to live, and a remarkable dog named Bella had decided to love him. The morning sun streamed through the farmhouse windows, painting golden stripes across the hardwood floor, where Bella lay sprawled in her usual spot, right in the center of the living room rug, surrounded by chaos. 6 gangly German shepherd puppies tumbled over each other in a whirl of oversized paws and wagging tails, their barks high-pitched with puppy excitement. And among them, like a tiny gray shadow, was Storm. The kitten, now 6 weeks old and thriving, perched precariously on Bella's back, his claws carefully sheathed as he rode his massive steed through the sea of puppies. His blue eyes gleamed with mischief as he batted at Bella's ears, which flicked back in playful response. When one of the puppies got too rowdy and bumped into them, Storm let out a squeaky hiss, puffing up to twice his size, a comical threat from a creature barely larger than Bella's paw. Bella, ever the patient matriarch, simply turned her head and scooped Storm closer with her muzzle, tucking him safely against her side before giving the offending puppy a warning nudge with her nose. Lena leaned against the door frame, her coffee forgotten in her hand, watching the scene with the same awe she'd felt every day since that stormy night. The sight never got old. This was family. Not just the biological kind, the puppies Bella had birthed, but the family she had chosen. The 4 kittens she'd rescued from the storm, 3 of whom had been adopted out to loving homes once they were weaned. But Storm had never left Bella's side, and watching them now, it was impossible to imagine them apart. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Lena had been filming the puppies' playtime for the shelter's social media page when Storm, ever the daredevil, decided the bookshelf looked like an excellent climbing challenge. Before Lena could react, the tiny kitten had scaled halfway up, his claws digging into the wood as he wobbled precariously on a shelf crowded with knickknacks. Bella, who had been dozing nearby, was on her feet in an instant. The German Shepherd positioned herself directly beneath Storm just as the kitten lost his grip. The fall seemed to happen in slow motion, Storm's tiny paws flailing, his tail puffed out in alarm, before he landed squarely in Bella's waiting jaws. The dog caught him gently by the scruff, as delicately as if she were holding one of her own newborns, and deposited him safely on the ground. Storm, completely unfazed, immediately tried to climb her leg like a tree. Lena had been laughing too hard to keep the camera steady, but the clip was pure gold. She posted it with a simple caption, "When your dog is a better mom than most humans." By morning, the video had exploded. Millions of views, thousands of comments. News outlets picked it up. Talk shows wanted interviews. Strangers sent messages, sharing how Bella and Storm's bond had moved them to tears. But the most powerful responses came from those who saw something deeper in the footage. Not just a cute animal video, but a testament to unconditional love. A firefighter wrote, "This dog understands rescue better than most people." A foster parent shared, "This is what family looks like, not blood, but who shows up when you need them." And a woman who had survived loss messaged Lena privately, "Bella refusing to let Storm fall. That's the kind of love that saves lives." The fame didn't change Bella. She remained the same devoted, watchful mother she'd always been, just now with a few more treats from admirers. Every night, without fail, Storm curled up against Bella's belly, his tiny body rising and falling with her steady breaths. When he had nightmares, yes, kittens had them too, Bella would wake instantly, licking his fur until he settled. When Storm outgrew nursing but still tried to knead Bella's stomach out of habit, the dog simply sighed and tolerated it, as if saying, "Fine, but you're embarrassing us both." And when the puppies grew big enough to play rough, Bella always intervened if they got too rowdy with Storm, placing a massive paw between him and his overzealous siblings, giving a low woof that meant gentle. He's small. The cameras didn't capture the quietest, most profound moment between them. It happened one evening, when Lena sat cross-legged on the floor beside Bella, scratching behind the dog's ears the way she loved. Storm lay draped across Bella's front paws, purring like a tiny engine, while the puppies dozed in a heap nearby. Lena's voice was soft, thick with emotion, as she whispered, "You're a hero, you know that?" Bella didn't wag her tail, didn't bark. She simply turned her head and leaned into Lena, resting her muzzle against the woman's chest, the same way she had that first night, when Storm's life hung in the balance. And in that moment, Lena understood. This wasn't just a dog who had saved kittens. This was a soul who had chosen love against all odds and fought for it with everything she had. Family isn't about what you're born into. It's about who fights for you, who catches you when you fall, who refuses to let you go. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it's a big golden dog with a heart too large for her chest and a tiny gray kitten who never doubted for a second that he belonged. Because love isn't about species, it's about choice. And Bella? She had chosen them all. Would you have walked away from those cries? Share this story if you believe in second chances and the families we find along the way.